Good afternoon. Happy New Year. Uh, Calling the meeting of the Sedro Woolley Rotary Club to order. Welcome to the Rotary Club, the greatest Rotary Club in the... Thank you. My little ditty for the day is from Jimmy Carter, who put this in the Rotary magazine. We feel that there's a human right of people to live in peace. We feel it is a human right to have a modicum of health care, to have a decent place to which to live, to have a chance to have an education, to have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to elect our own leaders. Therefore, invocation today is by Josh.
All right, bow our heads. Lord, thank you for this wonderful comfort food to bless our bodies. Thank you for this snow and beautiful white snow, and we will thank you when you take it away. I think everyone's pretty much done with it. In your name we pray, amen.
Yeah. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And with that, we will have a song led by Mark.
Okay, it's almost New Year's, so we need to sing Old Lang Syne. We got it from memory now. Let's see if we can get this. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days of old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne. We'll take a cup of kindness for old lang syne.
Very good, thank you. The four-way test, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Do we have any visiting Rotarians? Do we have any guests of Rotarians? I've sort of made an executive decision today that anyone that came out in the snow and attended will get credit for 2 meetings today. So we'll put that in the minutes and have our people keep care of that. There really isn't any, we had a presentation, that's not going to happen today. I don't really have any announcements except Happy New Year, and we'll be back on a regular basis next week. Thanks, Cheryl, for coming out here and bringing in all this good food. And the contract's been signed for the sound system, which will be put in February, I understand. So that'll be a good thing. Do we have anybody else that has an announcement? Okay, we're going to race through this. Give Donnie lots of time to talk today. How about the Wheel of Fortune?
Okay. Number 65.
Worth twice the price for being a Husky. Is that it? behind you. Are there any, well, I understand we have a special guest Sergeant of Arms today. And I will call on Louis to
So
entertain you.
I was talking to my dad yesterday. And he reminded me that his month was September. And he reminded me what else is September. Is this better?
Is this better?
How's that? How's that? All right. So Dad reminded me that in September he was in the hospital. So he missed his month and he likes to do Sergeant at Arms. So we thought that we would tag team this today. I'll just give it to him and let him go. So is it cutting out still? Yeah. All right. I'll hand it over to you, Dad, and you just go ahead and go for it. All right.
Well, I was hoping that there would be a lot more people here so I could pick on people, but I'm going to pick on people anyway. And I told Massey here that I was going to do the Mahalik trick, but I don't know if he's got enough in his wallet to do that. So I'm going to pick on Mark first for comment in the chow line. Testing my memory, it'll cost you a couple bucks. And Travis, you were a pretty good little league player. I was proud to be a coach. And for not winning that championship game, it cost you $2. What did you see this morning out in your lake? An otter? Did you take a picture of it? That'll cost you $2. Yeah, let's see. Becky. Let me take a look at your wallet. Oh, you do too. Where's your wallet? Let's see what you got in there. Open that up. Oh, that's your camouflaging. Oh, there you go. Now you had a really good real estate year, didn't you? And you got a lot of acknowledgments, so that'll cost you that 10 right there. Now, let's see. Rich, you're not supposed to find the president, but Phil Mahalik used to do it every time he was up there doing Sergeant of Arms. So got to find an excuse to find you though, and ringing that bell like you did it was terrible. It'll
I agree.
cost you $1. Yeah, and you usually don't find speakers, but your dad and I wrestled together at Skagit Valley College, and he was always better than me. Of course, he weighed 30 pounds more than I did. But I'm glad I didn't have to wrestle you, so that'll cost you a couple bucks just for being the son of a great man. Okay, let's see. And Don, how come you're $20 down today? Oh, you did. Well, I'll pay a couple bucks for that, but you came here with missing a tooth, right? You came here today missing a tooth? How'd you lose your teeth? Okay. Well, we won't find you after you got hit that hard. Let's see, who'd I miss? Yes. You know, I want to look in your wallet. You just pull out whatever you think is proper for me not looking in your wallet, and then put it on the table. Let's see, who did I miss? Oh. Who's telling over here? That'll cost you another $2. Tina? For that recognition, it'll cost you $2. And Eric, same to you. $2 just for the recognition of your name. All right. And the guy over here that thinks he's escaped it, that, let's see. Yeah. Yeah, get out your wallet. We're pretty sparse around here today, so you pull out what you think is right, too, and put it on there. Okay, Josh, you're a pretty good delegator. So that is going to cost you $2 also.
All right. That was much better than I could have done, I can tell you that. So went a little bit old school there, didn't we? Happy bucks.
I got a happy 20. The service for Matt was well attended. It was a really nice service. It was a horrible but really good reason to get to hang out with a bunch of classmates that were in town. So got to see some people I haven't seen since high school, which was pretty cool. And then the other thing is I got a call from Tristan, and she told me that Matt had collected Phil's blue bucket, recycling bucket, and was planning to come to Rotary and do that. So she asked me if I would pick up that task. So I now have the blue bucket. It's actually out in my truck, but I'll be bringing that when I come to Rotary for recycling.
Thanks, Travis. Eric.
I got a happy $10 right before kids went home for the Christmas holiday, or winter break, I should say. Got to deliver dictionaries with John Schmidt to Evergreen, and it was an absolute blast. John, by the way, is absolutely, it's pretty fun with the kids. Made it all the more enjoyable, but to be able to put a smile on their face and give them a gift, the gift of knowledge right before the break was truly special, and it's always a fun event. So I was happy to be a part of that.
Thanks, Eric. Anyone else? Anybody else happy? I think everybody ran out of money already, huh? With that Sergeant at Arms. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to let Josh introduce our speaker, but just a little background. His family, Donnie McMorrin, they rented our family homestead for near 50 years that we've had since the 1880s, 1890s. And they've taken wonderful care of our property. They're great farmers. Donnie has done a lot of things here in the community and has a lot of knowledge, and I think he's going to entertain you today. So, Josh. And that fellow, I'll give $2 for that. Even though he's got foolish stuff.
All right. Well, it's really too bad that we're sparsely attended today, because this is going to be a great program. It always is when Donnie comes, and I call him Donnie still. I know he's more formal these days as Don, but I know him as Donnie, and I've known Donnie for a long time, since high school. We've had many fun times out there on the homestead where he lives now. And we won't talk anymore about that. How's that? So here's Donnie McMorrin to talk about the status of the ag community in the county.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Rich, and thanks, Louie. Yeah, just want to take a moment just to kind of talk about generational friendship. You know, Louie talked about wrestling with my father back in college, and I just think, you know, we live in a very special place, and we're also fortunate that we can have these kind of generational friendships that move on throughout our lives. So thank you for that. So I want to talk to you today about big commodity agriculture in Skagit County. And we go to the next slide. Clicker's not working here. Talk a little bit about the land grant mission and why I'm a cougar and Josh is a husky. And the comment that I usually have is, what the heck has a husky ever done for a farmer? And that usually starts a pretty good conversation, because the University of Washington is known, of course, for their wonderful engineering program, their medical school, creating wonderful lawyers. So we have just kind of this great atmosphere at the University of Washington of producing these really high quality professionals. But then you have the land grant colleges and Abraham Lincoln in 1862 deciding that, hey, we need another system for the other folks. And that created the land grant mission. So there was land allocated to universities across the United States to start a university for the people. And that's what Abraham Lincoln said. And why I happen to be a large supporter of the land grant system, because their land grant mission is to educate the average person to get them to a higher level, and sharing of information is paramount within the land grant system. So they established that system, and then in 1914, two senators at the time, Smith and Lever, got together and they decided, okay, the system that they created wasn't enough, so they added an additional level to it and created the extension system, and that's what I'm a part of today. So that went the extra mile of getting people on the ground that could meet with farmers and give information from the university directly to the people. Prior to that time, a lot of the information was kept in the university system. So it's just a much different way of thinking about things and a much more sharing environment to help everyone succeed. And so a little background for you today. So in my office, I have about 20 staff. We have folks that do the gamut from livestock advisors, food, consumer sciences, home economics, master gardeners, agriculture, natural resources. How many 4-H'ers do we have in the room today? Any 4-H'ers? Okay, keep your hands raised, because I always like to do this. Any 4-H'ers in the room, raise your hands. And then if you have done any jail time, you can put your hand down. So usually within that, there's, I can have these conversations about how the 4-H system creates really great leaders, and people that tend not to spend time in prison. So then when I give conversations to the county commissioners, I'm able to say, look, you put in, say, $50,000 for our 4-H program in Skagit County, and it kicks out some really fabulous people that aren't going to spend time in the prison system. So my thought process is invest young, invest early, create good people, have less problem that Rich has to deal with later on in life. So another thing that's very important to me. So we can go to the next slide. I'm not sure we have. Yeah. On the next slide, it's going to talk a little bit about Skagit agriculture and why we're special here. We have some fabulous soils. That's great. We have this wonderful climate. Typically, maybe not today, but usually we're fairly moderate in temperatures. And with that, we also have some really amazing farmers that have been doing it for a very long time. And they pass on this generational wealth to the next generation. We also do things very differently in Skagit County, because we do things like vegetable seed pinning, where farmers all come together, the companies stick a pin in the map, and then nobody will plant within a mile of that field. That's not done in other places of the country. When I explain that process, it's very foreign to people, that you yourself might give up an opportunity to make a buck in a given year so that your neighbor can be successful. Also things like land trading, where farmers will trade land for better, for worse, for acre, in any given year so that they can have rotations of crops to keep the system moving smoothly. So an example of that is my father used to farm spinach seed, and spinach seed requires a rotation of upwards of 15 years. Well, if he was going to farm spinach seed on only his farm alone, he would only maybe get one field per year if he was lucky. But if he works with the bulb farmers, if he works with the dairy farmers, if he works with the potato farmers, he can keep several fields of spinach in rotation, manage through the pinning process so that the neighbors are all happy and appeased, and we all have 1 mile of isolation so that fields aren't cross-contaminating and pollinating each other, then we can have a lot more success together. So that kind of mentality doesn't happen other places in the world. Also, the amount of crops that we grow here, over 80 crops of significance. When I travel to the Midwest and I go to conferences and people start talking about the crops that they grow in their county, you get these folks from Midwest and they talk about, the 3 crops that are major importance. And I say, oh yeah, well, we grow 80. Their jaw kind of drops. They're like, how can you all know about 80 different crops in your county? And I'm really blessed that I have a research center right here in Mount Vernon. So I don't have to know all 80 crops. I do have to know probably 20 or 30 people that I can go to for advice on any given crop within the county to make sure that I'm outreaching to my farmers for the needs that they have. Next slide. So for you need some terminology. A lot of people have lost connection with their roots. So I'm always curious to see within the audience, how many of you are farmers? Raise your hand. All right, so we got some farmers. How many of you have grandparents, great-grandparents that are farmers or were farmers, right? So then you start seeing a lot more people. So what's happened over time is we've really gotten away from ag, and technology has helped in that process. You go back 100 years, more than 50% of the farmers were, for 50% of the population were farmers. Why? Because they needed that amount of labor to make things happen. Prior to that, the numbers even go higher. At one point, early in the United States, it's about 90% of the population were farmers. Now we're down to less than 1%. How's that happened? Technology. We can do a lot of really amazing things. But with that, we've lost a lot of our terminology. The average person doesn't know what an acre is. Me growing to an ag school at Oregon State, they drilled it into 43,560 square feet. But for you outside, an acre's a little bit smaller than a football field. So as we go through this presentation, you can think about, okay, how many football fields is he talking about? That'll give you kind of a spatial reference. Next slide. So we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up into commodity products within Skagit County. So starting at number 14, we have cucumbers. Cucumbers used to be a huge crop in Skagit County. My father grew a lot of them for a company called Farmans, but there was Nally's, there were Steinfields. A lot of big producers produced a lot of pickles here in Skagit. What happened to the industry? Well, if you go to the store and you look at a jar of pickles from Nally's, it says on the front side of the jar, flavor of the Northwest, right? Then turn the jar to the back side and read on the back of it, it will say product of Mexico and India. Shocking. Well, what happened? What happened was it's a whole lot easier to grow crops outside of the United States, less regulations, cheaper labor. And so cucumbers and pickles went that route. Luckily, we still have one remaining processor here in Skagit County. Their name is Gilo Pickles. It's a company that comes to us from Michigan. And how many of you have had Gilo Pickles? No, you haven't. Why? Because they only sell wholesale. So you've probably eaten a Gilo pickle, but you don't know it. You don't know where it came from. So I've asked them to start producing a retail line, and they said, look, we're not interested in it. We have our niche. We're going to go with restaurants, and we're not willing to change at this time. So hopefully that can change, because I know back when Pleasant Valley Pickles was growing cucumbers here in Skagit County, you really liked their product. It was amazing. But right now it's hard for you to access local products. We need to make that more available. And where does it start? It starts with you, the consumer, going to the grocery store and going, look, I want to be able to support my local farmers. Where's the cucumbers I can buy that are local? And then watching the store manager kind of scratch his head and go, oh, okay, well, we'll make a note of it and just keep asking, keep pestering them. Because when you go into the store, you'll see signs, local farmers, we buy from so-and-so farmer, and their definition of local is kind of different from mine and different from the USDA maybe, in that, you know, my idea of local is something that we can point to here in Skagit. Their definition goes clear down to Oregon, California, what have you. The USDA's definition is 350 miles. But in truth, your food comes from an average of 1,500 miles from your home. So the whole system has changed. A lot of the food that we eat goes to wholesale locations. For example, if you're in Wenatchee, Wenatchee is the capital of apples in the United States, but you can't go to the grocery store and buy a good apple in Wenatchee. So something has broken down within the system. What happens is they buy apples from Wenatchee, they ship them to a central warehouse somewhere in the Midwest, and then they redistribute those apples back to the supermarket in Wenatchee. And that's actually a better system for the grocery stores than just having a farmer deliver it from a few miles away. So once again, kind of thinking outside the box for you as a consumer, how you can really change the system. Next slide. Next one is raspberries. It's number 13 on the list with about 300 acres and $900,000 of production here in Skagit. This used to be a really popular crop, and to be honest, it's just fallen flat on its face, mostly because of root rot, mostly because of high labor and high labor costs in being able to have pickers hand pick this fruit. That being said, our neighbors to the north of us, Whatcom County, is the #1 county in the United States for raspberry production. So still happening in a major way in Whatcom, not as much here, mostly because we have wetter soils that we have problems with root rot with. Next. Number 12 is strawberries, kind of the same lines as raspberries, down to about 500 acres in Skagit County, valued at a little over $1 million. I'm sure you've all had strawberries in Skagit County. They are way better than anything you can buy in the grocery store, way better than anything coming out of California. Once again, kind of that distribution marketplace. When people go to the grocery store now, they expect to buy strawberries all year long. Your parents, your grandparents really celebrated summer with eating fresh strawberries. It's just a change in mindset. The consumer wants it all year long, so therefore production is happening in other places other than Skagit. Next slide. Number 11, this is a newcomer to Skagit County, is beans. Not something I ever remembered seeing when I was a kid, but the last few years, our farmers have been searching for alternatives, mostly large potato farmers, because they like to have a 3-year rotation. So they like to plant potatoes and then go with a different crop for 2 more years before coming back to potatoes again to break up the disease cycle on that crop. So we used to have green peas, another kind of casualty of large-scale agriculture and economics. Green peas, the last producer here was Twin City Foods, and they closed down their production in 2010. They decided to close that plant because it was 1 penny per pound more expensive to produce in Skagit County than it was in their Idaho facility. And so So Stanwood got closed first, then Idaho, and the Moses Lake plant is still up and running. But as you look at agriculture and how it's changed, who knows when that will make a change too. Also with that, I get all these people that come to me and they say, Don, we really want to bring the peat industry back. What can we do? And the first thing I ask them is, when was the last time you ate peas? And you can kind of watch the wheels start to turn. And like, gosh, I don't know. It's been a couple years now. So, you know, peas used to be with every meal when I was a kid. You had peas and potatoes. You had it in these frozen meals that you would, you know, TV dinners. Remember those days? That's gone by the wayside. People's preference for food has definitely changed in a major way. So with that, the industry has changed as well. So I tell them, well, first go back to your grocery store and, you know, buy out the pea section there. That's a good start. And then we'll work at getting something back as an industry back into the community. Next slide. Number 10 is grass seed production. And this is one that we've really seen grown over the last couple of years, and it's going to continue to grow. My father happens to grow grass seed, and it's a great little crop for Skagit County. We have really good soils. We can grow grass, you know, without hardly having to work at it. Don't need to irrigate like in other areas of the country. And the price is up on grass seed, almost double from traditional 70 cents a pound. We're seeing $1.38 now. So that's really great. Mark. So tall fescue and perennial ryegrass. So yields for these things, you know, typical about 1,500 pounds the acre. So you're not talking a tremendous volume, and you're not talking tremendous money either at $1.38 a pound, but it's a really great rotation, and it's a perennial crop. So you plant it and it can be in the same field up to 5 years for perennial ryegrass. Fescue, you can get 10 years out of it. So you're not having to go back in and plow and do all of those other things that annual cropping systems do. Next slide. Number 9 is the vegetable seed industry, valued at about $6 million. So the big three for Skagit County, starting at the top, is spinach seed. And I made mention of that earlier, where it requires a 15-year rotation. And that's because of a disease in the soil called fusarium. And fusarium builds up after you grow spinach seed. So you could come in and fumigate that, but that's quite expensive and very hard on soils. So the preferred alternative for our growers is just to wait and to let the disease die out over time. Next up is beet seed at 300 acres. This one has really fallen off as well. We used to have 1,000 acres of beet seed in the valley, but New Zealand is kicking our tail on beet seed because they don't have to grow it off-site as a biennial like they do here in Skagit County. We typically grow the bulbs over in Whidbey Island and then transport them and transplant them into the ground in the early spring for the following season. Then you have cabbage seed we're down to about 200 acres and $1 million worth of production there. That's another one that's really taken a hit in diseases. So we've recently found black leg and black rot in Skagit County. Not something that's been here traditionally. We've been able to deal with it, but as we have more and more brassicas grown in the area, we're seeing that crop take a decrease in numbers. And then of course, a lot of miscellaneous crops like coriander and mustards and other crops that are kind of exciting and they're fun to watch being produced in Skagit County. Also, you know, majority of people, they have no idea that we're vegetable seed producers here. So really need your help in bringing awareness to these crops, because without this seed production, you know, this is a major component of vegetable production in the United States. You have to have good quality seed. So where you're growing, say, small baby leaf in Arizona, in California, they require about 1 million seeds to the acre. Those seeds have to come from somewhere, and there's very few places in the world you can grow spinach seed. So we're very fortunate that we can do that here. Next slide. Next one is a completely new crop to Skagit County, which is Brussels sprouts. We have one major producer that has cracked the code on this crop and has just been growing leaps and bounds for about the last 10 years. So growing upwards of 2,000 acres and a value of around $10 million. Been pretty fun watching this one grow over time and where the markets are. Apparently, the Canadians eat a ton of Brussels sprouts in and around Christmas time. And so a good majority of our Brussels sprouts head north to meet that need. Next slide. Number 7 is organic production, and it has a value of about $14 million and continues to grow. You're seeing more and more consumers be aware of the products that they're eating and consuming, and a good majority of consumers are moving toward organics. For example, go to Costco now and try to buy a non-organic apple. It's kind of hard to do. And so what's happening in the marketplace, and the growers have figured this out, is they're going to grow all of their product the same, if it's going to be organic or conventional, and then they'll decide, they'll let the marketplace decide where the product goes. So for example, Ray DeVries is a good example of this. So he grows organic leeks. He grows them organic, and if somebody wants some commercial leeks, he'll take the same supply chain and he'll sell them as commercial as well. So I see the industry heading more in this direction as consumers become more concerned about what they're eating. Next slide. Next one is eggs and fryers at $27 million. Have any of you had the opportunity to tour Draper Valley Farms? No, you have to sign up. You should take the whole Rotary and take them on a tour of Draper Valley Farms and go through their slaughter facility in Mount Vernon. It's a $10 million a year business. They're growing hundreds of thousands of chickens, and it's all highly mechanized process. You can watch these chickens, they get hung up on these hooks and chains. They go through the kill process, they're defeathered, and there's one being processed. I think they do 200 birds a minute. Anyways, it's like being at a Ford factory on an assembly line and watching parts and stuff move. A lot of things happen very quickly, and it's just interesting to see. So I'd highly recommend your Rotary do that, and also a good idea for you to learn where your food comes from, right? And many people might argue humanitarian issues and what have you, but learn about it so that you know what's happening within the industry, and you can see and make good judgment and become a good educated voter. Kind of the same lines on the egg industry. So in California, they've gone away from cages for chickens, and it used to be that they would throw 2-3 chickens in these little tiny cages, and there were standards set forth, and it was like 1 square foot per chicken was the minimum standard, and then it went to 2 feet, and then it went to 4 feet. Finally, they just decided, well, we'll put the chickens out in a barn and raise them differently and have these open structures. And I was talking to the Dines back when they were producing chickens, and they said that they were going to move to that system and allow the birds to go outside. So they put in these doors, and the birds didn't want to go outside. They'd rather be inside. So it's kind of interesting. So how consumers really change the marketplace and how animals are raised. Then we move into number 5, which is $35 million in production of miscellaneous crops. So we had things like bamboo that's being produced by a grower out on Dunbar Road, lots of Christmas tree, dill, fennel gourds, poplar trees. A big one in Skagit County now is marijuana. Did you know that there's $13 million of marijuana produced in our county every year? It's becoming a huge industry. I don't want to get into the details of where you are politically on it, but it is a major economic driver in our county. And we also have a little bit of tea production as well. Number 4 is field crops at $35 million. So this includes things like alfalfa, the grains like barley and wheat and what have you. As I traveled the nation, a good majority of people have no idea that grains are grown in Western Washington. And it just seems ridiculous to me that they wouldn't understand that we probably have some of the best production in the world. In fact, in 1914, Whidbey Island set a world record for wheat production as far as yield. So we have a lot of potential. And I was talking with a gentleman here today about how, we don't even have to try to make 200 bushels an acre here because we have this thing called rain. It comes from the sky. And as you travel, remember that number, 200 bushels, and ask them what they get where they're at. And you'll hear things like 60 bushel an acre, right? And they work pretty hard at it. We don't even have to try to do that. So we're very blessed with a great production of grains. And we also have some good research going along with that in Dr. Stephen Jones at the Bread Lab, where he's bringing in these old varieties and breeding them to do really well here in Skagit without the use of pesticides. Number 3 is dairy at around $39 million a year. This is another one that's really tanking on us. It's just harder for the dairy industry to survive in Skagit County. There's a lot of regulatory pressures. And so we're losing a good number of dairies. When my dad was a kid, there were 600 dairies in Skagit County. When I was a young boy, there was 200. Now we're down to 25. I talked to a good friend that owns a dairy, and they're looking at moving outside the county, outside the state, to have reduced regulations. This one is another one of those that, you can get caught up in pretty easily politically, but I think for you as Rotarians, the message that you should be pushing is we need the dairy industry because we need those nutrients going back onto our fields. Yes, can we get away with using commercial fertilizers? Certainly. And you can get away with it for 20, 30 years, but at some point, you'll really notice an uptick if you're able to apply manures back to fields. So our dairy industry is needed here, and we need to make sure that we can support them and keep them around. Number 2 is the nursery greenhouse, floriculture and sod at $55 million per year. So another huge industry. Sod's really picked up the last few years. As you think of things like our Skagit County Tulip Festival, our neighbors to the south of us, that's really all we're known for. And that's great, but we also need to make sure that we're educating on other crops as well. And then number 1 is potato production at around $60 million a year. This one has been holding up the agriculture industry in Skagit County for a long time. I'm hoping that can continue. We grow some fabulous niche variety of potatoes, reds, whites, yellows, purples, fingerlings. We do not grow any russet Burbanks here. And so as you think about the future and how markets change and what have you, we're hopeful that we can keep this one going for the near future. So that kind of brings me to the end of my presentation. Happy to have conversations about Skagit Ag and get some of your thoughts as well that I can take back to the office. Go ahead. Yeah, as you talk about harvest facilities, at one point in time, there was like 25 different processors in Skagit. And we had things like Stokely, Van Camp, and Carnation, and all of those. They've all largely left. We're left with Gilo Pickles. We've got Sakuma Brothers that have fully integrated their operations. We have our potato warehouses that are just basically packing their own product now. We've got Skagit Malting, which is really coming on for the grains and being able to store and market those. But that's really where I see us falling down. Like, we have the land, that's not a problem. We have the machinery, that's not a problem. Labor's a little bit sticky, but really, if you look at forward, what's hampering Skagit County, I'd like to see some of that processing come back. And unfortunately, everybody's been telling me that that's probably not going to happen. So we'll just keep pedaling along with what we've got and do our best. Yeah. Mhm. So according to the Blueberry Commission, blueberries is continuing to grow. But they're kind of running up against the wall in that there's a lot of production that's going to come on, because you don't just plant blueberries and have a full field in full production. It takes a few years to get them up to production. So they weren't doing anything with it. So kind of, I guess it's a kind of a crossing line for me, because the floods that just recently happened in Whatcom County up in Canada, they flooded blueberry fields, I've been told 5-10 feet deep with water. And blueberries will survive 2 weeks of water without any problems. But I just got a picture sent to me of basically a 50-acre field up in Sumas that is completely inundated with water, and now that water has froze. I don't think those blueberries are going to survive. So that's telling me that there's probably going to be an opportunity for a blueberry farmer this year, but chances are that field that froze out, that farmer will tear all those berries out and probably plant it right back to blueberries, because what else are you going to do with it? And then, 4 or 5 years down the road, we'll see depressed prices again. This last year, farmers were making almost $1 a pound for blueberries. Prior to that, it was 50 cents. 50 cents is the break even for blueberries. So. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, all done by machine. And that's really the future. We had a pickle producer out of India that came to me, and he wanted to establish a trial for cucumbers, and same story. Like they think you can just take your, $1 per day India labor and have that here. And it's just, it's not happening. And, as I think back to my growing up on a farm here, the people that worked for our farm, they were really happy to be there. They were really happy to have a job. And now agriculture is really looked down upon as a profession. And I think that's a real shame that we're not encouraging people to take on agriculture as a profession. But I also think farming has kind of done it to themselves, because they haven't been really high wage givers in the past. And I think that kind of changes because of this atmosphere that we're under. So many of you might not be aware, but the dairy industry is now having to pay time and a half overtime. And then all of agriculture within 2 years will have to provide overtime for farm laborers. So it's really going to change the whole system that we're living under. And my hope is that when that happens, more people will be interested in the industry and want to get involved in it. Rich. Yeah, so the question is, how many acres of farmland have we lost? I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. Ellen Bynum has been really good about digging those up. For all intents and purposes, Skagit County has done a great job at protecting ag, specifically from development. Where we've fallen down is on the environmental side and environmental restorations for things like salmon habitat and wildlife. So we've lost the majority of the acres that we've lost because it's turned from agriculture into habitat. And so my thought process has always been, that's good for habitat, but at some point in time, and I think COVID was a really good indicator of that, when you all went to your grocery stores and you started seeing the shelves starting to get bare, and a good majority of you went, uh-oh, what am I going to do to feed myself if this food that usually comes to us from 1,500 miles away can't make it here? And so a good majority of you went out and you purchased things like shares in CSAs, community supported agriculture, where you could work with a local farmer, you pay them ahead of time, and then they give you a box of food every week. So those things skyrocketed in COVID, and that really helped that small farm market in a major way in 2020. So the interesting thing has been, what do you do if you're a farmer and you make a lot of money? You double the size of your operation, right? So that's what most farmers did. Small organic farms that were doing CSAs from 2020, they doubled the size of their operation in 2021. And guess what happens? All those people that signed up for CSA said, nah, I can just go to the grocery store. I don't need you anymore. And so those farmers took a major hit. So thinking about, back to your question, Rich, of acres lost, I would say you live in a county that really prioritizes agriculture, and you should be really proud of that. That's a great place. Mark? Yeah, it was a strawberry field when I was a kid. Yeah, yeah. It's 10 feet deep. It's not coming back. And that's, when we think about Skagit Ag and protecting it and the farmland legacy and other programs, that's where we need your help in protecting it early, because once it's paved, it's paved forever. It's just really hard to bring back. I do have some friends that are interested in purchasing it and turning it into condominiums and other things. And so, yeah, I'd love to see it turn back into ag, but it's not going to happen. No kidding. No. Yeah. Go ahead. Mhm. There's a whole lot of fabulous ideas, and I get them all the time. People using technology to grow food indoors. I've yet to see one that has gone the distance and really been successful for a long term. There's a few examples out there, but the premise is, rather than just having this footprint of agriculture and dragging tractors and equipment over the top of it, using pesticides, that you can go vertical. So you can make a skyscraper and you can infiltrate it with lights, and you can grow lights, and you don't necessarily need the outdoor infrastructure. It's a great idea, and I think eventually we will get there. But where we're at right now is food is cheap. On average, you're spending about 6% of your income on food. So until food starts to become expensive and land becomes scarce, we're probably not going to see a whole lot of indoor grow in a big major way. I don't see it. That being said, though, I'm working with these companies and they're telling me that that's the future, that there's no reason for us to grow outside. There's weeds outside. There's too many inputs that need to happen outside, and you can have your crop ruined. Whereas if it's inside, it's protected, and they can do a better job of controlling the environment. So it's the future. It's just not really perfected yet. Louis. We were really blessed. I would tell everyone that we got flooding in the normal places where it floods every year, just in a much bigger way. Things like the Nookachamps got hit really hard out in Bow, on the Samish. But luckily, knock on wood, all of our diking infrastructure held up and the Skagit didn't overflow its banks. So I tell folks we were largely saved. That being said, there is a GoFundMe account for a local dairyman in the Nookachamps who lost 50 cows. That has a significant impact on his operation. So if you're interested in contributing to that, I'd highly recommend it. Louis, and then we'll close out. Yeah. Jerusalem artichokes. Yeah, it's still an idea that's out there. Unfortunately, his idea didn't go the distance. There are some plants in South America that are up and operating on Jerusalem artichokes and endive and what have you. So it's out there. It's just not here in the United States. Good. Well, thanks so much for allowing me to speak to you today. It was a great pleasure.
Johnny, we have a commemorative pin for you. I don't know, you probably have a couple, but keep using it. Thank you. Thank you for those that showed today. And if you can help pick up, we were a little optimistic, I see, in setting up at the table. So if we can help take all those down, it'd be appreciated. With that, we're closed and we'll see you next week.